All right, we have a couple of other topics that I sort of would that I sort of mentioned that I would love to talk about.
Sure.
But before I get to that, there's one thing that I've noticed as a car journalist working with automakers and driving their cars and interviewing their engineers, and I think on some level there's just going to have to be a reality, an understanding among automakers that Tesla is an anomaly in some ways. You can't necessarily replicate what Tesla has done.
Mm-hmm.
You can't come out with an SUV. Like a lot of automakers, hey, let's just come out with an electric SUV. It'll sell like crazy. Look at the Model Y is selling like crazy. It doesn't work that way. I just drove the new Fisker Ocean, which believe it or not, you may have seen that a lot of people had an issue. I kind of dig it. I actually think it's special. It looks cool. It's fun to drive. The thing about it is you can't just come out with a compelling electric SUV and expect it to do what a Tesla Model Y does, or same thing with a sedan and a Model S. Tesla is first off, they were first they were first. That's part of it. Second, they're larger than life. They are like, the brand is bolstered by this person who is larger than life.
Sure.
And it's like, if you're a brand and you think you can replicate based on Tesla's numbers, that is not gonna happen. Like and I think like a lot of these stories about EV sales are not what they were expected to be or whatever. It's like, I don't know. There needs to be a reality that on some level, Tesla is Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've talked to a lot of OEMs. For anyone that's heard me say this again, I apologize. But and they want to know, right, about the gigacastings and some things that Tesla does, and where's the difference, right? And what can they do to emulate them in a positive sense, right? And I think the simple fact of the matter is, one thing that's really interesting is, like, think of your time at FCA, right? How FCA is organized and just the sheer number of platforms that they have. And then look at Tesla, right? It's essentially like 2.5-ish, now 3 with the Cybertruck,
Yep.
right? Model S, and I wouldn't say they're very similar. They're not. Model S, Model X, Model 3, Model Y. There are people that you and I knew, right, that were responsible for twice that amount of vehicles.
Oh yeah, totally.
By themselves. So there's a whole organizational structure thing that I think that people don't give, I think, big auto enough credit for, because they're essentially managing things at scale that Tesla still doesn't, right? As far as like portfolios, and they also care in some ways about things that Tesla doesn't care about, right? Like, they don't care if you get the same, they didn't even care like the Model Y with the gigacastings. Maybe you got a 4860 pack with gigacastings. Maybe you didn't. No one knew. The fact that we got one, like, we had a lot of our customers come to us in some ways only because we had one, right? Because they had bought 2 or 3 Teslas from Austin, and they didn't have a gigacasting. So that's wild. Where, I mean, think of like some big change on like a Rubicon, right? Where they're like, that can't happen as a running change. Well, they'd never stand for it, that my Rubicon had this amount of content and yours had something different, from a whole slew of reasons, right? Just from your order guide alone, right? But they don't care. Yeah. They don't care. And a lot of the people that like their stuff, they look at it more as software as it's updating. They just see it's like, yeah, it's continual progress. That's kind of what we expected,
I like that. I like that side of what Tesla does, that sort of continual change. Who does that like at a level that I don't even think Tesla does, is Chinese automakers.
I don't have a good sense, even though we have one sitting here. But that is an interesting question, right? In general. I'd love to hear your take on anything from the China EV perspective.
So I drove some in Germany, or a Funky Cat. I drove a Maxus, minivan MPV. I drove an iWays U6, and I spoke with some of their representatives there in Germany, and there was kind of like a braggy nature towards the conversation. It was like, I was like, so we were talking about competing with established automakers there in Germany. One of the representatives for one of the Chinese car companies said, "Oh yeah, they can't compete with us. They're not even our competition. They're not even competitive. The only competitors are the other Chinese automakers." And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And one of them showed me a a rear wiper on their car. They're like, see that rear wiper right there? We came out with our car. Some customers said, hey, why doesn't this car have a rear wiper? And like within 6 months, it was part of the, within less than 6 months, we had a rear wiper, like you could buy it. Like it was now part of the car. They're like, we make changes so fast. And I don't know if, I pulled that out of my behind,
Sure.
But they're like, we make changes so quickly. Like that doesn't happen with Western automakers. And so, yeah, now things are getting really weird in Europe with Chinese automakers. It's like, okay, honestly, the whole story of the Chinese automakers and Western car companies, it's kind of a fascinating story because you probably remember like 10 years ago, all the automakers like, yo, we're making so much bread in China. It's ridiculous. It's the biggest freaking market. We're just cha-ching. The cash register is just clicking. Gold coins, bills everywhere. And well, part of that was like, hey, if you want to sell cars here, you have to be part of a joint venture.
Yes.
And which is kind of freaking genius. I mean, if we're being real. And now, and I'm not saying that China didn't know how to build cars before Western automakers started building cars there.
They do now.
But I am saying is they know how to build cars after all of those joint ventures from those automakers who were talking about how much bread they were making in China. And now those automakers in China are going to the home of the Western automakers, Volkswagen, going straight to Germany, out-competing in some ways, those very automakers. It's crazy. It's kind of insane in some ways.
Yeah, I think in many ways, I think we have a series of layers of insulation from, I think, the problem that Europe has with Chinese EVs. But the whole thing is wild. Like even, over various, like the last 5 years or so, we have a slew of different customers, some who build in China, some who want to build in China. And if you talk to them, like, I think the biggest issue is, and maybe this might be coming home to roost for them, is the cost difference, right? Everything is subsidized significantly in China. There's no, like you're saying, it was all partnerships. And I think a lot of people, if they didn't realize, if you're going to China and you get, sure, you're getting like amazing labor rates, machine rates, and things of that nature. And sometimes, like the best that the world has to offer inside, as far as like, capability, at prices that you'll never find anywhere else, to include even like, Mexico, which some people have hailed in the past as like the next great low cost, bastion, if you will, for the automotive industry. And the numbers, none of them make any sense. Like when you look at some of the, like an identical part that's made in Mexico or here or other places in the world compared to that same part in China, it's like,
and you would know because you literally do that for a living.
Yeah, it's unfeasible sometimes, right? And there's always like different commercial things that happen, that may affect material piece. I don't want to say material piece price, but piece price. So there's always commercial side of things, or negotiations are always a little weird. But there's that factor, and to me, it's almost like the Tesla factor. When people talk about it, I'm like, yeah, they can iterate, but when it comes to value, they're like worth as much as the rest of the industry together, right? So when it comes to like, if they want to make a decision about tooling or not tooling, they're like, how much money does it save us? Well, it theoretically could save us this, or like, I want 3 parallel efforts to investigate it. And as they fall off, just, and then consolidate those efforts and go forward and find me the right one, right? And not every company can do that. They don't have that type of money, to leverage or whatever it is. So it's very interesting to see, but for us, I think the only thing is we've done some things for better, for worse, on like the protectionist side as far as EV incentives.
And some people in the media have sort of decried those efforts, saying, cheap electric cars from China get more people driving electric, and so that's a good thing.